with the Optimism Foundation. I think we're live now, so let's just kick it off here. Cool. Welcome, everyone. My name is Josh. I'm with the Optimism Foundation, working on a range of things across strategy and BD and partnerships. One of the things that we're digging into at Optimism is the way that we look at AI and machine learning and the benefits of it being on-chain. That's going to kind of be the premise of this call. We'll talk through that a little bit more, both from our side at Optimism, but then especially with our special guest today, which is Kathy from ORA, who I'm excited to dig into a lot more details on and what they deployed. Just a quick disclaimer about OP Radio. So as a whole, speakers are speaking in their personal capacities, not for their respective companies. To the extent there are any, do not rely on any forward-looking statements made during the episode. And remember, OP is a governance token, not an investment. Nothing in this episode is or should be construed as investment advice. Okay, now that the disclaimer's out of the way, the goodness that starts. So why don't we just, again, just to set the narrative. So ETH Denver this year, a lot of conversations about decentralized AI, decentralized AGI, crypto by AI. As a whole, it seems like there's a lot of things that are still being sussed out, and I don't think it's crystal clear. And I think this conversation will probably bring that to light a little bit. At Optimism, we are looking across an array of different layers, like in the AI/ML stack. We're looking at the app layer, we're looking at the data layer, we're looking at the compute layer. We're looking at agent frameworks and orchestration and inference and training and the way foundational models play a role. We're trying to figure out what storage and payments and a whole area, set of sub areas look like. And so we are still definitely in the research phase ourselves. And I think we're quite proud to say that we're researching as opposed to pushing things to market. That being said, one of the teams that is going to market and has a much stronger stance on that is the ORA team, who I'm thrilled that is on this call with us today. We've got Kathy, who is with the team. So the bulk of this will all be about ORA and kind of what they're bringing to market and why we're thrilled to have them working with us in Optimism. So with that said, Kathy, do you mind just giving an intro of yourself and a high level of ORA?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Actually, I'm glad that you brought up ETH Denver because we actually had a very exciting announcement at ETH Denver that I would love to share a little bit more later. But yeah, let's go with introduction first. So hi, everyone. I'm Kathy. I'm the chief scientist at ORA. So previously, I was a researcher at Ethereum Foundation, PSC specifically, focusing on research on zero-knowledge machine learning. And really, ORA having an initiative which is called optimistic machine learning, so OP machine learning, is what really kind of like sucked me into all the tech initiatives that the company is doing and the project. And there's a lot of different things going on, right? So ORA is a verifiable Oracle protocol. Our first product is actually a ZK Oracle, which takes like on-chain data as a data source, perform arbitrary compute on that, and having the proof kind of sent back to the smart contract for further actions. And our second product, which is our most recent product, is actually an on-chain AI Oracle. So that means that any smart contract can actually request a model inference result from a certain inference and then receive a callback of that model inference result, right? So just to put it more concretely, let's say if we have Stable Diffusion, right? So usually you write a prompt and send to Stable Diffusion. In that case, you will actually put the prompt into a smart contract call, and then our AI Oracle would return the output image of this Stable Diffusion inference back onto your smart contract. So these are, I guess, like two of the main products that we have at ORA right now.
Yes, love it. So your background is super extensive and it's amazing. I mean, it's pretty uncommon to meet people who have already worked at the intersection of both blockchain and ML. So just before we start digging into ORA in more detail, can you ELI5 ZKML for us just to start, and then not to jump too far ahead, but how that would quickly compare to OPML? Just the ELI5 would be great.
Yeah, so it's always hard to do an ELI5 on this. So zero-knowledge machine learning is basically saying that, well, we are doing this machine learning inference, right? So hopefully everyone understand that in the Web2 sense, which is, okay, I put some data into a model, and then that model will spit out some data, right? So this process, normally we just trust it from the server provider or service provider that they are giving us the right result, right? So ZKML is basically taking this whole result and putting it into a mathematical proof called zero-knowledge proof. And then essentially we can just verify that proof and trust that this kind of process has been carried out correctly. So that was the goal of ZKML. And to answer George's question about like how does that compare with OPML, a good comparison, if the audience is already familiar with ZK rollup versus OP rollup, ZKML and OPML is sort of the same counterpart, which I find it really funny because actually in the rollup world, we have OP rollup first, right? And then we jumped into ZK rollup. And in the verifiable ML world is the exact opposite, which we had ZKML first, and then in Aura's mind, it's like, well, why couldn't we do it optimistically, right? So by doing it optimistically, that means that we are actually trusting that a single submitter to kind of be the first one to publish the result and claim the reward, whereas everyone participating in the network will be challenging that. So that's very similar to the optimistic rollup consensus process.
And just to dig a little bit deeper, can you talk about who's actually challenging on the OPML side, like what the challenge process looks like?
Yeah, so essentially when we say challenge and verifier, really they're all same, like the participants in the same network, right? So originally they're all at the same level. So these are nodes that is kind of participating in this OPML network, right? But whenever there is a request coming in, which is the user saying, hey, I want the result of this thing, like, can you give it to me? Then there will be one of these nodes who will be the fastest to compute this result, right? Because there's always differences in computation time. And that node would be the one that first to claim the reward, right? Whereas everyone else becomes potential challengers if they also run that computation and find any discrepancies. Of course, if they don't find any discrepancies, then no one will become the challenger. And then this first submission will become the final result.
Perfect. And that is optimistic rollups as a whole. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so you guys obviously have been cranking through things. You talked about the two products. So I think what would be awesome is if you can tell us a little bit more of if we go back maybe like 12 months, where Aura's come from. I think there was a pretty big announcement of where you guys just graduated out of in terms of an accelerator. So can you kind of tell me about the past 12 months for you guys and what that's looked like?
Yeah, so well, actually, I might not be the best person to talk about this. I recently joined, but I have been very close with the team for a very long time. Like, they are my good friends. And so, well, first thing first is that Aura was rebranded from Hyper Oracle, right? So if the name Aura sounds a little bit unfamiliar to you, perhaps maybe Hyper Oracle, if you're in the ZK space before, you've heard of. So from Hyper Oracle, that's when we had our first product, ZK Oracle, and that has always been a major focus of our development to develop kind of the proof system of taking these on-chain data and computing further proof of it. So that's one thing. And then around, I think 3-4 months ago, which is the accelerator, well, it's not exactly an accelerator, but we recently just graduated from HF0. We joined HF0, which is more of a hacker house co-living space sort of initiative, where a lot of different projects at early stage kind of come together and really focus just on building in this 3 to 4 months. So around, I think 4 months ago, we got to know the HF0 team, and we just really instantly clicked. And yeah, so our team has been building at HF0 ever since. There are a lot of kind of product coming out. So some of the things that we released during this process, I can't recall exactly, but I think that the Onchain AI Oracle that I mentioned was released during this process, at least going up to mainnet. and also testnet was released during this kind of co-living initiative, as well as we also announced a initiative that provides the $1 million question, provides answer to the $1 million question of like, what does AI and blockchain, have to do with each other, right? So when we posted this Onchain AI article, a lot of people asked us, which is like, why do we need Onchain AI, right? And a lot of the times people ask like, what does AI do for blockchain? And I would actually challenge to think otherwise, actually the exact opposite, which is what can blockchain do for AI? And that's why we have also started a new initiative. It's not really a product, but more of a protocol or a concept per se, which is IMO, Initial Model Offerings. So essentially, this is what blockchain can do for AI companies. Especially at HN0, we have in our same cohort, we have a lot of AI companies, and we see sort of firsthand the struggles of AI companies have nowadays, right? So first of all, you have like tech giants that their models are really hard to beat. And second of all is constantly a struggle to open source their models, right? Because essentially, as soon as you open source a model, your investor will challenge you where your revenue stream come from. And initial model offering sort of is trying to solve that problem by providing, by saying that we can actually tokenize model ownership, right? So tokenizing this model ownership have several purposes. It could be used to fundraise, or it could also be used to award your open source contributors. And the value of these tokens actually come from the inherent mechanism behind how this token is run. So accompanying this IMO initiative, we have actually written a ERC. It's in draft right now. It's ERC 7641. And that actually describes a mechanism of how do we have these sort of like revenue sharing mechanism with this tokenized ownership. So to kind of bring everything into the full circle, so imagine if you have a model that is already open source and you have a bunch of open source contributors contributing to this model, you can reward them with these tokens. And let's say if this model get deployed for different on-chain purposes, it could be on our AI Oracle, on-chain AI Oracle. It could be on some other people maybe use it for NFTs. These people, if they would like to, they can actually all share these revenues back to these token owners. Right? So there is a constant like incentives for people to be contributing to this model. There's an incentive for the model owner, the token owner, to be kind of promoting this model, even if it's open source. So this is kind of like how we see what blockchain can do for the AI industry.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, a big thing that we work on at Optimism and the superchain as a whole is retro public goods funding. And obviously it's very similar and in line to what you're talking about of like the rev share of basically paying contributors to bring it back. I'm sure there's a way that we can, especially on the open source model side, start to think of the ways that retroactive public goods funding could tie into the way that ORA is thinking of basically funding future support for open source models. You touched on a ton of information, Kathy. It was so good. I've got a lot of questions. One quick thing, and just on the tail end of that, is when you're talking about the models that you are kind of focusing on, can you talk a little bit more about what are the foundational models that ORA is focused on, and both the open source and non-open source, I guess, like those that you guys are keen to continue to work with?
Yeah, so currently on both testnet and mainnet, we have a stable diffusion and also Llama on chain. So these are the sort of like two big open source models that I think everyone kind of know about. And also, I think last week we have Grok, which is kind of an experimental feature that we try to put on chain as well. So it's available on our website. If anyone wants to check it out and play around with it, we have a front-end interface to interact with the contract. So that's the models that are currently available. And we do hear from the communities that these might not be models that people usually use. And really for us, the first few models are for demonstration purpose, right? Is to demonstrate the capability of our on-chain AI Oracle. But moving forward, as Josh, you just asked, like there are a lot of models possibly out there that we want to kind of work with or bring on chain, right? So one class or family of models is probably like models that are fine-tuned on Stable Diffusion or Llama or other LLM alikes, right? So and then it becomes a question of like how to pick out like a good fine-tuned models to put on this on-chain Oracle, because there are always like limited resources, even though it's much cheaper than ZKML. I guess the other class of models is really any AI companies that are willing to open source their models, right? For everyone, not just the blockchain community to use, and also are interested in this IMO initiative, right? So they trust the power of both open source and decentralization, so that they're willing to distribute this model. And we would love to work with these AI companies to sort of like have this whole full circle of life cycle of what to do with, how to actually provide this service to the blockchain.
Yeah, absolutely love it. I'm trying to hit the heart emoji with almost every sentence you're saying, but I don't know how to do it. Really quick, one other thing that you mentioned, ERC 7641, really exciting to hear about that as well. Do you guys have a white paper or like an RFP or anything out that the community can read on that yet?
Yeah, so it's currently like one of the pull requests on the GitHub repo. It's not being like merged on the website yet. So if you go on like GitHub / I think Ethereum /ERCs with an S, you can actually search up like 7641. We have a forum page on Ethereum Magician, which is also kind of just the exact same draft that we have on the GitHub. So Ethereum Magicians is sort of where you discuss about ERCs. And we welcome any feedback there. So it's more of like a forum site where you can also check out what our proposal is and have discussions there. So it's quite a long process from being a draft to finally really getting like finalized and being like an official ERC. So between that, there's a lot of kind of exciting discussions and perhaps improvements to this standard.
Yeah, I mean, so just on that alone, would love to do a further deep dive on, the IMO piece that you're thinking about. Would love to do a further deep dive into 7641. Would love to do a further deep dive on the open source models, especially the adoption of future ones. A lot of good topics. So I'm going to keep pushing because there's so much to talk to. I have a feeling we need to do a follow-up for sure. So when you guys were thinking of building the Onchain Oracle, to pull it back to that, which, is the product that you guys just launched, can you tell me a little bit more about how you developed that, how you inevitably optimized that?
Yeah, so there's quite some interesting thing, right? So, well, we mentioned about ZKML. One thing I didn't mention earlier is that ZKML is, at least at its current state, incredibly expensive. It's estimated to be at least like 1,000 times more expensive than just running the machine learning model like natively as in like using GPU or CPU without the zero knowledge proof, right? So when we do this, well, that's how we thought of having this optimistic alternative. And really, we saw a demand for like AI being on chain. There are a lot of people talking about this. Hence, there's a huge kind of demand with ZKML research before, right? And we see OPML as something that can immediately be on chain. So I think that being said, one of the biggest challenge, at least we're currently facing right now, if you try to interact with our Oracle, is that the gas fee is incredibly expensive on L1, right? So especially, so we have done some optimization already. For Stable Diffusion, we actually don't send back the entire image on chain. We send back the IPFS address of the image. But with text, we do understand that sometimes people want to consume that text directly in their smart contract, right? So for text, we are just sending the raw text like response, right? So if we say hi to Llama and Llama say hello, you are actually gonna receive that hello text in your smart contract. So that callback fee sort of become quite expensive, where user has to pay for it, or at least the smart contract using this model has to pay for it. So that's why we are also exploring a lot of different solutions, right? First of all, on data availability side, but also on how to reduce gas fee, right? So hence we're here at this call today with Optimism, because Optimism is definitely one of the L2s that we are looking to deploy on-chain AI Oracle onto. And we think that that would actually solves a lot of the usability issue that people are facing right now when they're trying to develop it on mainnet.
Yes, that last part, definitely want to drill into that for a second. So you guys are live on ETH mainnet, correct?
Correct.
And then that second question. So as we met to the team, obviously your emphasis on open source, it very much aligns with everything we're trying to do with Optimism. And I do think that there may be a integration in the very near term that those that are listening may or may not see, in the near term. That being said, can you dig in a little bit more? Say like what excites you about Optimism, just especially coming from the Ethereum Foundation? I'm just curious to hear like what drives you towards like OP mainnet, but then more broadly, which we haven't gotten to yet, frankly, in conversations, but about the superchain. And any quick thoughts you have on that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, what attracts me about Optimism? So I've been paying a lot of attention to the retroactive grants that you have. Actually, I have also been advising some teams that are applying for these retroactive grants. I think it's very interesting. There's a lot of categories that are not commonly in other kind of like I guess ecosystem grants. I don't remember the category name exactly, but at least I know that for the project that I'm advising, they're doing some sort of like city sustainability governance kind of thing. So I think that's very interesting that there is even a grant category on that. And also on the totally permissionless open source side of things, I know that, like, for example, there's a new kind of fault-proof VM in Rust that Optimism has released. And it's just quite amazing to see that, a protocol is willing to open source such a new initiative that everyone else can just look at and play around with and actually build upon. So I think at ORA, we also value that culture a lot. A lot of our, I think most of our codes are open source, and people are free to play around with it as well as fork it or build their own system, right? So our OPML stack is actually fully open source.
Yeah, love it. So I don't know if you saw the new retro PGF rounds that were just announced 2 days ago from our team. Huge announcement for what's to come. Rounds 1 through 3 have gone very well. The subsequent rounds are going to even get better and better. So I would definitely point the teams. I can even drop that link to you. I'm sure we can share it in the notes too, but that was just announced, I think, 2 days ago in some guidelines for teams, which is we're incredibly excited about. And yeah, so I mean, we're thrilled, obviously, to kind of be one of the first teams that you guys are talking to, like outside of ETHMET, for what it means to go live on potentially integrate Aura. Cool. So kind of swinging back into like a little bit more in terms of some thinking that went into what you guys are building with Aura, a little bit more on OPML. So we're going to dig in now on the OPML side, and can you talk a little bit more about how you're actually using AI inference in smart contracts and kind of the approach to OPML more specifically?
Right. So from the users or developers perspective, really what they're seeing is I make a request in the smart contract through a function call, right? And then a while later, the AI Oracle submit a callback into your smart contract with the result, right? So that's really all what developers can see and experience. But under the hood, we actually run OPML, which is, I mentioned earlier, with the submitter and challenger kind of mechanism. But also we make use of the bisection interactive dispute game, right? So earlier I mentioned like, okay, if there's no challenge, then that's essentially it, right? Someone submit, other people doesn't challenge, then we commit that result. But what if there is a dispute, right? So if there is a dispute, we're actually going to conduct something called an interactive bisection dispute game, right? So essentially what we have done is this ML program, it can run in native execution, but it can also run in the fault-proof VM that we have. And the fault-proof VM that we have currently is actually based on Cannon, which is from Optimism, right? And then, so at each step, basically the challenger and the submitter will check the middle of the step, right? So the middle of the whole kind of compute, and see whether the result that they got, the result that they got from the step that they're checking is matches or not, right? Essentially, so you can think of it as you have like this giant sequence, and you check the middle of it. Well, if the middle doesn't match, then you know that something has gone wrong in the first half, right? And if the middle matches, then you know that the discrepancy happens later, at least not before the first half, before the half point. So that's sort of what we do, and then it just keeps going on, right? And then you get a half of the half of the half until you get to the point where you're able to pinpoint where exactly the execution has gone wrong. So that's how, like, when there is a challenge, this is sort of the dispute game that will go under the hood. So yeah, so that's really how our on-chain AI Oracle works currently.
Got it. That makes sense. So when you're thinking of like I guess the use of the Oracle, what do you think of the kind of the broader possibilities of it? And I guess you could even kind of pontificate on like AI and blockchain intersection as a whole. Like, what do you think of like key use cases of it? And then, yeah, the secondary step of like zooming out more broadly, how do you see those two worlds coming together?
Right. So I think first of all is, there are a lot of oracles or even AI oracles out there. I think we opt to use OPML because of we believe that blockchain and decentralization is all about trustlessness and also verifiability, right? So usually there are many oracles out there, and some of them are just taking off-chain data source and pushing it back to on-chain, right? Without any sort of verifiability. So that's one thing that we want to provide, right? So we actually think that verifiability is a spectrum. You can have totally like trusted result on one side, and maybe on the other side is ZKML, which is definitely the most verifiable, right? And the most trustless in a way, but it's sort of out of reach at the moment, right? So I think we can have this sort of OPA approach as the middle ground of verifiability and efficiency. So I guess that's sort of the first thing about what we do on blockchain. I think the second thing about sort of the grander scheme of things is really solving the liquidity problem, distribution problem, and contribution problem of AI, right? So how do we resolve that? We know that, well, from a lot of examples, for example, there is a hugely popular open source LLM called RWKV. So they are actually fully open source, and they have shown that by having an open source initiative, you can have a really good LLM. So I think recently they have shown that their latest version is better than Llama 2, right? So, but then there's also this ongoing problem of how do you actually maintain that, right? And how do anyone actually push for this ongoing open source initiative? And how do you, once things are open source, how do you really like raise money on that, right? So I think this is also what crypto, like at the intersection of AI and blockchain, like what blockchain is able to do for AI. So yeah, that sort of like what I all said just ties back to the IMO, the initial model offering initiative that we brought up, which is really we want to both have a tokenization, right, to solve all the problems that I mentioned, but also verifiability. We want things to be verifiable before we consume it on the blockchain.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think I haven't heard of the liquidity distribution contribution problem when it comes to open source models, but it makes sense. and how IMOs can basically help solve that trilemma, kind of right in the middle of it. So you mentioned a couple of times the verifiability. I'm curious, have you guys looked at Ethereum attestation as a service and actually incorporating that into the Onchain Oracle or any of the work that you guys are doing at ORA?
Yeah, well, we have definitely looked into that. It's just currently not exactly in our test deck, but we have been doing a lot of research on that as well.
Got it. Just so you know, it is native in OP stack contracts, I believe. So something you guys should know. Cool. Then I guess like if we think of like let's say OAO is fully productionized, it's out in the market. Like what do you think are like maybe two things, kind of key use cases, which I think leads into another thing. You mentioned that you're advising teams that are applying for retro PGF, like so a few use cases, maybe like 2 to 3 use cases, but then also like what you would recommend future builders start to think about and how they can actually incorporate OER once it's live on like OP mainnet and going forward.
Yeah, so well, fresh out of the oven, we actually just came back from ETH Taipei last weekend, and we were one of the bounty kind of sponsors at the hackathon over there. And I would say the quality of projects there are amazing. So we have had 2 submissions that I would definitely like to highlight. The first one is actually by me, and I didn't apply for our own bounty, just a disclaimer. But I just really want to build that out. And I thought that the hackathon would be a good place for me to focus on 2-3 days, right? Not on the actual core stack, but something fun that I've been thinking of. So actually the use case that I built was called Grok versus Llama. So as I mentioned, we have bought Grok and also Llama on chain with Onchain AI Oracle. And people who have played around with Grok has found it to be very glitchy. So it has a lot of glitch, right? Glitch meaning that it's not giving the response that it should be, or it's just repeating the same sentence or nonsense all the time, or even sometimes it will spit out something that looks like a program log that isn't even like natural language, right? So those are called glitches. So if you are on Twitter or now X a lot, you probably have seen people do that for ChatGPT a lot, which is they will screenshot the glitches and share it, right? And then yell like, "Dev, please do something," right? And that's not exactly a very efficient way of bug reporting in a way, right? And especially with Grok, because it's such a huge model, to rerun it is actually very expensive. So what if we can have a verifiable way to prove that Grok has said something wrong or has glitched? And even better, what if we have an objective way to prove that Grok has glitched, right? So it's called Grok versus Llama because basically what I've built is within the same smart contract, you can prompt Grok, right? And if you found that it's a glitch, you will then submit it as a glitch to try to claim the bounty. And the way whether this bounty is payout or not is actually we will prompt engineer and ask Llama, hey, this is what Grok has said. Oh, this was a prompt, and this is what Grok has said. Can you tell me whether Grok has glitched?
Interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So who would be paying out the bounty in that capacity? Like Aura would or X would actually?
Yeah. So well, in this case, it was more of a proof of concept, but ideally the model provider should, right? So people who build this build this model and wants to receive bug reports, especially important glitches, they should provide a bounty, right, for people to do that. And the good thing about the amazing thing about this is there's totally no manual payout. Essentially, you're just using one LLM to evaluate another LLM. Or you can even use itself to evaluate, right? I could actually prompt Llama and go back and ask Llama, hey, can you check this conversation, whether you have glitch? So it's a totally objective and verifiable way to have this sort of bug report or bounty claim out.
Oh, that's awesome. Kathy, we need to do a hackathon together. I'd love to build with you.
Yeah.
So we're thinking of, we're kicking that around this idea of what it actually might mean for us to run like a blockchain AI /ML piece. But anyway, that's future thinking that I would love to jam on.
I also actually have a second use case if we have time to share at all.
Yes.
Yeah. So the other other submission that we have is actually called insurance. It's insurance, but replacing the URA with ORA. It's a very it's a very interesting pun, but basically they're saying that, well, we have always in blockchain we've always been struggling the translation between a legal contract and a smart contract, right? So for a lot of these protocols trying to build a arbitration service or something alike, basically they have a teams of lawyers and programmers working together so that they can have a smart contract that can sort of execute all these like legal terms or whatever. But what this team has built is, what if we just leave the contract in natural language? And we use a on-chain LLM to actually evaluate whether whether a claim based on the term of this natural language contract, right, just a regular insurance or regular legal contract, whether this claim based on these terms should be paid out.
I mean, that's brilliant.
So you just
brilliant.
yeah.
The NLP side to use it as like we asking this all the time actually is can you put, can we just make these legal contracts smart contracts, and now actually using an NLP interface on it and then verifying it with the claim actually. So we were very lightly involved with a hackathon in SF, and it was focused on fintech and AI agents. And one of the teams that did very well actually was looking at also payouts, because obviously, like, when we think of one of the good use cases that blockchain has for the ML community as a whole is like, if you're running agents to do any kind of set of tasks, how are you actually doing payment between them? And obviously payment and settlement via like a cryptocurrency or a stable coin or something like that is obviously considerably faster. It doesn't have any kind of latency that a lot of the historic payment rails do. But it was very similar to that, of like, how do you expedite the settlement? So that was more on the finance and the payment side of it. But from the legal and the contractual side, it's absolutely brilliant to kind of use that interface. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I really like that project. It's so brilliant and so amazing.
Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so the last thing I asked on that last piece, which I still want to get your thoughts on, but I'll move that to the tail end, is like basically how can devs get more involved? We'll ask it in a second. I will say, like, so again, at Optimism, the big thing that we're assessing and we're trying to be very careful of is like, what can go on chain and what can't go on chain, right? Like, you obviously can't run the same kind of compute on chain, et cetera. So I'm just curious to hear a little bit more of like the limitations versus like the feasibility in your mind of what it actually means to put some of these, a lot of the kind of the AI stack, let's just, I guess, generically call it that. What can go on chain, what cannot go on chain, and then what kind of are limitations in your mind versus things that we might actually be able to stress and move on chain.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So I think, well, my personal take is that everything can go on chain. Of course, there's a lot of limitation, a lot of I guess like doubts or even criticism we have been getting is, well, if it's optimistic, it's not going to be private, right? I would say that the stack is definitely solving different problems here, right? Even with the history of oracles, it has always been that, yes, well, maybe someone paid for that oracle result, but it's being like consumed by everyone, right? It's essentially the reason you want it to be on chain is you want that transparency. So we're really solving sort of that sector of the problem, and definitely, of course, privacy is a limitation. But my background is actually from CKML research, as I mentioned earlier. So we are also at ORA, we have research on that as well. So we have released quite a few research paper. One of the most recent one is actually called OPI, Optimistic Privacy Preserving AI. So essentially is our idea of how to put ZK and OPML together. So a ELI5 is essentially saying that, hey, what if we just run the very critical parts that you want to keep private in ZK, and for the rest of it, you can do it in optimistic. So that's sort of like what we're trying to balance this this sort of dilemma in a way, because really we just trust that we should enable AI or even just any size compute on Ethereum. And so we're not going to stop until we are able to do that.
Got it. Yeah, I think reading that paper would be also very interesting. It seems like the site is going to be a trove of knowledge of what's to come and a lot of alpha, which is awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna last couple questions and then we'll wrap it up. So what other teams like in the space? I guess the next ones are kind of a little bit less. So before I go into the other ones, is there anything kind of at a high level about ORA or the mission or where you guys are trying to go that you want to talk through? And then I'm going to throw some other kind of lighter questions for you.
Yeah, so currently our direction is we are Ethereum's trustless AI. So as I said, our mission is actually to enable AI and any size compute on Ethereum. And the reason why we want to do that is really to decentralize and secure dApps, right? So we want to enable dApps to have that computation power, but at the same time, we guarantee that it's secure and decentralized. So this is really the core value that we're going for. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Okay, softball questions, easier ones. Tell me about 2 to 3 other teams that you're actually really excited about. They can either be in blockchain, they can be in AIML, just as a whole. A couple projects you're very excited about.
Okay. That's an interesting question. So I do have to first have a disclaimer is that I am advising most of these projects that I mentioned. But really, they're also really exciting. So first of all, it's actually 7007 Lab, or the other way around. I think they just renamed to Lab 7007. But essentially, 7007 is another ERC that I have co-authored with some of my friends from the ORA team. Back then, I wasn't working at ORA yet. But it's a ERC on a standard that for verifiable AI-generated content token. Right. So essentially, AI-generated NFT is not a new thing, but there is no end-to-end verifiability to it. Right. You can just generate something or even draw something and say that AI generated, or vice versa. Right. So how do we actually have this guarantee? And that ties back to how AI companies could potentially monetize on their model. Is that we provide a end-to-end verifiability, which is, hey, this AI-generated content is from this model with this prompt. So this is a absolute proof of creatorship, as well as usage of that model. So the 7007 Lab is actually building upon this standard and trying to really make verifiable AI-generated content token flourish. So I think this is something that is really exciting. The other project, again, disclaimer, I'm also advising them, is called Virtual Protocol. And they are doing AI agents. Essentially, they are using economic incentives and blockchain to incentivize people to be training these AI agents. Currently is mostly AI waifu, right? Which is like girlfriends that you can talk to online. But it could be broader than that, right? It's just really LLM agents that are people are incentivized to contribute to. And I think starting with AI waifu is actually a brilliant idea because it has the sort of both the gimmick and also the eye-catching factor to it. But I guess the mechanism behind is also very interesting, like how they actually reward contributors as well as people who are running the model. So yeah, those are the 2 projects that I would say very exciting about.
That's awesome. So virtual or Virgil?
Virtual. So VIRTUAL.
Yeah,
but there is a lot of projects with the same name. Yeah. Just want to note that. Yeah.
That's super cool. Thank you for sharing that. So we're actually on our side at Optimism, we're having conversations with a couple of teams that are again on the agent orchestration, agent framework side, and even a little on the AI assistant side that are trying to kind of solve some of the pieces that you mentioned, which is really exciting. So I'm excited for what's to come in the next couple of months for Optimism as a whole. I think in this overlap, it's really exciting. One quick thing on the Lab 707. not trying to plug EAS too much, but I do wonder if there's a way that EAS could kind of play a role in that kind of verification stack. But seed to plant. Last two things. What are you reading, or what researchers or what papers do you like? If anything that's kind of like more nerdy that you're digging into on the side, and it can be lighter as well, fiction, nonfiction. Maybe you don't read, maybe you just like lectures or podcasts or something. Just learning.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, well, the thing is, I use AI to help me like Google search a lot, so that sort of abstract away for me from like the source itself. I guess that's the worst part of it. So I do like a lot of research on like these like AI wrappers things. But recently, really, I'm looking into model fine tuning, right? So because for the paper that I mentioned, right, we can combine ZK and OP ML onto the same thing, right, onto the same model. And really, one of the use case would be like fine-tuned models, right? So for example, like Stable Diffusion, when you fine-tune it, you only really change a few layers. Well, not a few, but a small portion of the layers in the giant like model. So that could be well adapted to what we have proposed, which is, well, what if we just do ZK on the model weights that have changed, that is different from the open source one. So that's essentially what I've been studying right now, which is a lot of fine-tuned models. And are there, different fine-tuned models that are different from like what we already popularly know, which is like Stable Diffusion or LLM? Are there any other fine-tuned models that people use? So yeah, so that's what I've been researching on recently.
Love it. Cool. Yeah. Well, I always want to give a shout out for the researchers. You're obviously one of them, so shout out to you. Cool. This is a great conversation as a whole. Kathy, I'm excited to talk more. I'm excited for ORA to be kind of brought to the OP stack, OP mainnet, Superchain. Thrilled that obviously you guys are emphasizing open source as much as you are, and I personally have a lot to do in terms of learning more about IMO. And like I said, I think maybe we could even have another deep dive on a couple of topics that you covered. I will, what's the best way for teams to get in touch with Aura? What's the best way for individuals to get in touch with you? How can developers that want to build connect?
Yeah, so our website is aura.io, very simple. And our Twitter handle is Aura Protocol. So at Aura Protocol. So most of our developers as well as community is on our Discord. Our team is quite accessible on Discord. You can just ask us any questions about like tech stack as well as like how to use Onchain AI Oracle. So that would be the best way to reach us.
Got it. Love it. Any last words? Otherwise, we'll wrap up.
No, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. So just remember, if you don't remember anything from this live stream today, just remember Aura is Ethereum trustless AI.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you so much, Kathy, for making the time. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. It was a little longer radio, but I think it was well worth it. A lot of juicy alpha in here and a lot for all of us to learn about. So we're excited again for Aura and the Aura Optimism partnership. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting. Thanks. Bye.